And every day, I practice martial arts.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Sifu. I'm good, Sifu. How are you?
I'm doing well, man.
All right.
So, Dre, what you got for me today?
What I got for you, Sifu, a while back, we were talking about Grandmaster Yip Man potentially training some person to beat Bruce Lee's ass because he created Jeet Kune Do. Is that really something that happened? Did that really go down the way they're saying it went down?
Yes, and that's the whole story. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. No, well, when you ask a yes or no question, that's what you get. So, as a matter of fact, this was a rumor that I had not heard about until I interviewed John Little the first time, way back in season 1, and we were talking about Bruce Lee's real fights.
Yeah,
and that episode was the impetus for John Little to write the book Wrath of the Dragon, which chronicled all of the real fights of Bruce Lee. So, trivia fact, the reason why he wrote that book was because of his episode with KFG, right?
Hey.
So during that episode, I believe it was during that episode, either he said it to me off camera or he said it to me on camera, I don't remember, that one of the reasons why Bruce Lee was doing good mornings, which is a weight training exercise where you basically have a barbell on your back.
Done good mornings? Yeah,
and then you basically bend forward at the waist and then go back up. So it's really a lower back exercise. And if you do it with an extreme amount of weight, especially if you have back issues, it might not be the best way to train your posterior chain. But then the story was that Bruce Lee then hurt his back severely, and that's how he got his famous back injury, which put him out of commission for at least a solid 6 months before he could start coming back to it. Now, that's also the same back injury that the movie Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, spun into, like the fight with Johnny Sins or Johnny Toe, whatever that guy's name was, right?
I prefer Johnny Sins, to be fair.
And so then he, so the back injury was kind of famous. It even made it into the lore of, the films and stuff like that.
Right.
Hey, everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, and I just wanted to let you know that the best way to support the KFG podcast is on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to full episodes early, which include the additional Patreon and member questions not published in this video. If you want me to answer your questions about Wing Chun, Bruce Lee, or any Kung Fu related topic, join Patreon and those questions will make it onto each exclusive member-only video. Patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius to support your favorite Kung Fu podcast from New York City. Get your early access and questions answered directly. If you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can also join us here for YouTube memberships at the KFG Insider level or higher, and also get your questions answered on those exclusive episodes of the KFG podcast. And finally, you can support us in other ways by subscribing to this channel and sharing our content. And as always, the best nation is the donation, and you can donate directly through PayPal. That link is in the description below. And thank you so much for supporting the Kung Fu Genius podcast. But even the back injury, the real reason why he got the back injury is up slightly for a little bit of debate. But the story that John Little had told me was that Ted Wong, who was one of Bruce Lee's students, mentioned this to John Little. And then later, I talked to another student of Ted Wong, Bill Matucci, and he told me this, and he told me the same thing. He told me that Ted Wong told him the same story. So this is a story told by Ted Wong, one of Bruce Lee's students.
Have you met Ted Wong?
No, Ted Wong unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. But our good friend Vincent Benitez is in the line of Ted Wong, so I have a lot of connection if I want to get some information about Ted Wong and stuff like that. So the story was that Bruce Lee was doing these good mornings, and then he eventually hurt his back. He herniated some disc, or he had caused some major damage in one of his vertebrae.
Doesn't sound like a good morning.
And exactly right. And the reason was, why was Bruce Lee doing good mornings? So the story, at least according to the way it was presented to me, was that because Bruce Lee was training to do some kind of almost like a fireman's carry or some kind of style of takedown where he would duck under the incoming punches and then kind of cinch up the waist and then lift up and basically do a pile driver or a suplex or even just a simple lift and carry and throw, right? So for whatever reason, Bruce felt the need to train some kind of takedown where he would grab, lift, and then dump his opponent, right? And the reason why is the interesting part. So supposedly it had come to Bruce Lee's attention that his sifu in Wing Chun, Yip Man, was none too pleased that he had created his own style of Jeet Kune Do.
Right.
And, which basically in Chinese custom, if you are a student of a sifu of whatever style, and you decide to then create your own style, you are basically kind of insulting your own sifu by saying like their style is not good enough, therefore you had to create your own style.
Well, it's a good thing you haven't heard of my style, Ison Essential.
Oh, Ison Essential? Wow. Yeah, we're gonna.
You haven't heard of it yet.
I'm gonna have to send Mikey Deane to come kick your ass later.
Oh God.
And not only are you like insulting your teacher, but you're also like becoming, to use like a religious analogy, like an apostate to the style. You're breaking away, so you're no longer a believer, right? So for these reasons, you would generally have been shunned by your former martial arts community, right? So according, in 1967, is the first time we really hear of the term Jeet Kune Do, right? Although it first came out in 1967, obviously Bruce Lee didn't just come up with Jeet Kune Do in a minute and then coin the term. Obviously, it was probably something that he had been developing for a while. And then the term Jeet Kune Do comes out, and then for all intents and purposes, Bruce Lee has broken away from Wing Chun, orthodoxy, or his sifu or whatever. Wow. And of course, Yip Man, being a traditional Chinese sifu, would be very upset about this, would be salty. And then in this case, decides that he's going to send someone. Now, whether Yip Man was going to train this guy personally, or whether this person was a student of Yip Man, or was just a student of one of his students who happened to be a good fighter, it's not entirely clear. But Yip Man was then going to send this fighter to go over and, embarrass Bruce Lee in such a way so as to show him that, your Jeet Kune Do is not everything, right? Now, that's the story. Now, according to what I can't even say according to Ted Wong, I can only say according to people who heard this story from Ted Wong. So again, it's already secondhand to Ted Wong's version by the time you hear it from me. So always keep that with a grain, take that with a grain of salt. That because Bruce had heard that, probably through one of his former Wing Chun classmates, that Yip Man was none too pleased that he had created Jeet Kune Do and now was going to send someone to go and beat him up. Bruce seemingly took that threat seriously enough that he started training especially for that. So, in hindsight, I find the story very implausible that Yip Man would have been so salty that he would go out of his way to send someone to a foreign country to try to like commit an assault on Bruce Lee and then get away with this while claiming credit as a Wing Chun guy, but this person not getting in trouble and this not totally blowing up in his face, right? The story sounds a little implausible, but it seems that, at least if we're to take Ted Wong's story, or at least what I've heard of it at face value, that Bruce thought the threat was credible enough that he actually started training specifically for it. And so the idea was as...
Specifically for this?
So as Bruce Lee was a former, classical Wing Chun practitioner himself. Right,
so he kind of knew what to train against.
He kind of knew that whoever would come towards him as a Yip Man Wing Chun challenger or a spokesman, this person would most likely, storm at him with the kind of the normal Wing Chun toolkit, chain punches, nonstop attacks, aggressive stuff like that. And Wing Chun being a relatively upright striking style, Bruce, probably through his years of having done some grappling training through judo and having been exposed to different types of martial arts in the States, thought, okay, well, while Bruce may have felt competent enough in Wing Chun to use Wing Chun against the karate guys he was encountering in the States, maybe he felt like, but the Wing Chun guys in Hong Kong are obviously, they know this stuff. So maybe his Wing Chun is good enough for the people in the States, but his Wing Chun may not be at the same level of someone who's like very high ranking in Wing Chun.
So he had to come different.
It seems that he took it credibly enough that he didn't want to just say, okay, well, if someone comes, I'll just, beat that person using my superior Wing Chun skills. He thought, why don't I do something that the Wing Chun person isn't going to expect? And if you think about it, relatively upright style, Wing Chun being, and if that person storms in and steps in with chain punches, that taking a kind of a page out of the grappler's handbook, you duck under the punches, you make like really hardcore like head contact and control to the hips and waist. you grab either behind the knees or behind the waist, and you just lift this person up and dump them either by suplex or fireman's carry, or just lift them up and take them down, and then do something that this Wing Chun person most likely was not equipped to handle. So in order to make himself either more explosive or to have a stronger posterior chain, that's your rear end, ladies and gentlemen, that he would then do these good mornings, which is like for training like your lower back and all sorts of stuff, right? And then perhaps he got a little overzealous in that training, and that's what led to his back injury. Now, when I heard this version of the story from John Little, and then Bill Matucci kind of corroborated, he's like, yeah, like
Bill Matucci.
Yeah, Ted.
Have you met Bill Matucci?
I have. Yeah, he's down in Florida. In fact, I see him every now and again when I go down there.
Shout out to Bill Matucci.
Yeah, well, and he's in the city every now and again.
I got to meet this guy.
Super cool dude.
Yeah.
And a wealth of information in terms of like JKD and especially Ted Wong stuff. So, so if you think about it, that actually, so what can we get from this story? One, Bruce was clearly a lot more forward thinking than a lot of martial artists at the time, because the idea of thinking like, how would I defeat someone who is really even maybe better than me at my own style? Well, let's do something totally different rather than just trying to, you know, have the better cookie cutter. Let's like do something totally different, right? And for him to dig into the well of grappling as the potential antidote to dealing with a really good Wing Chun person shows, especially you have to realize like now that might be kind of obvious, but we're talking about almost 30 years before the UFC.
Yeah.
All right. And Bruce was already thinking about stuff like that. So incredibly forward thinking, right? So what we do know from the story, or say what we can say with some degree of certainty, now I'm not saying that's a high degree, is that it had come to Bruce's attention. Yip Man was not happy, and Yip Man was going to send someone. Bruce took it credibly enough to start training specifically for this, right? And then if you look, there's a series of photos, I believe they were taking either in the late 60s or the extreme early 70s, where Bruce is outside wearing boxing gloves. He's got headgear on, and he's doing what we would kind of almost consider like, it looks like modern day kickboxing. Obviously, he's doing Jeet Kune Do, but I mean, just from an aesthetic, there he is with boxing gloves. His partner has like a headgear on, very, very modern style sparring. And in one of the photos, Bruce Lee is doing like a fireman's carry. And I don't know whether he has like, there was a Caucasian guy in the photo series, and I think Ted Wong was in there too. And you see Bruce kind of standing up.
Love those Caucasian guys.
Bruce was standing up, and he was holding on to this guy by his legs.
Yeah.
And he had the guy over his shoulder, head down, which is kind of like a type of fireman's carry, right? And so there you actually see Bruce doing something that's not like something out of his Dao of Jeet Kune Do notes, which is all the kickboxing stuff, and it's certainly not from Wing Chun. There, Bruce Lee is actually doing something pretty recognizable as wrestling
or grappling. What do you think planted that seed in that?
So that I don't know. So I can like, you know, I wrote here in my notes, so I kind of wrote down a little bit like some of the main things I wanted to talk about. One, the big question would be who, because if we're talking about the time of, you know, Bruce had formalized or he had come up with the term Jeet Kune Do, then we're talking about the late 60s. So already by this time, Yip Man was for all intents and purposes retired. Okay. So we're not talking about, and Yip Man was never really a spring chicken when he was teaching Wing Chun. He was already quite old by the time he started teaching, right?
Like my age.
Actually, he was even older than you right now before he started teaching. So you have to think everyone who learned Wing Chun from Yip Man in Hong Kong, they learned from a Yip Man who is older than you are now. Like he didn't even start teaching. That's old. That's all right. That's ancient. Right? Yeah. So
dinosaur level.
Yeah, so the question would be, okay, by the late 60s, most of the students who had learned, let's say, directly by hand from Yip Man, that period had already come and gone. Because really during the 1950s, when you look at the early period or beginning middle period students, those are the guys who got the most hands-on stuff from Yip Man, right? But then as he got older, he would rely more on his seniors to teach. And, you know, he wasn't as active. And even when he did teach, most likely it wasn't like with the same kind of vigor and enthusiasm as in the early days, right? So the question is, all right, well, then who was he going to send in the late 60s? Okay. So, because I don't think he was really training anyone at that time.
Learn Ting.
Yeah, right. Certainly not, right? Because I mean, Leung Ting was already like Leung Ting's reasons from learning from Yip Man were very different, and also Leung Ting with all of his expertise and his unique positioning to Yip Man. I mean, he's not the guy you would send in to start some shit. You know what I mean? Leung Ting was the guy who would train people who would go and start some shit, right? So the question was, if Yip Man was planning on sending someone to start trouble for Bruce Lee, it wasn't even necessarily someone who was a quote unquote direct student, because most of his direct students who learned by hand from him, that was like 16 years earlier, 15 years earlier. So those students were maybe a little bit older themselves. They already had their own skill. Wong Sun Leung by that point was already retired from his, rooftop matches, his Beimo, right? He didn't do those anymore. He was teaching. And so without Wong Sun Leung doing it, all right? And also there would be some motivation stuff there with Wong Sun Leung. Wong Sun Leung was close to Bruce Lee and he was the guy who taught him. So maybe just out of friendship, Wong Sun Leung would not have been the guy to do that, right? So if not Wong Sun Leung, who was it going to be, right?
I imagine it was someone really close to Bruce Lee as like a double spot.
It's
like
possible.
Unicorn Chan,
it's
somebody.
But Unicorn Chan wasn't a Wing Chun guy.
True,
yeah,
true.
He was just a childhood
Could have
friend.
been. Okay.
All right. Okay. I don't think you're allowed to learn Wing Chun if your name is Unicorn. I think there's something in the old rule book, in the old ancient scrolls, right?
Goodness.
If your name is Keilun in Canton, you cannot learn Wing Chun, right?
Okay.
So for me, when I heard this story, first of all, I had never heard it before. John told it to me. I was like, wow. And then I was like, hey, look, he was doing good mornings because he was going to do some kind of grappling attack. Cool. All right. He took the threat credibly enough that he actually started to train this. And then we have photos of him actually doing it, right? And that this extra reliance on the good mornings to make himself stronger in doing this kind of takedown may be the reason why he hurt his back, okay? But like for me, a couple questions exist about the legitimacy of this story. Now, because the thing is, what people sometimes don't realize is Bruce Lee may have actually thought Yip Man was going to send someone. And he may have thought Yip Man was going to send someone either because someone told him that, or maybe he was just a little paranoid, thinking defensively that maybe some of his old classmates may want to come after him for having said some negative things about Wing Chun. So he just wanted to have like a toolkit that would allow him to take care of a Wing Chun person in a way where it didn't pit his Wing Chun versus a potentially more superior Wing Chun fighter's Wing Chun, right? So he wanted to have a couple tricks, couple things up his sleeve in case he suddenly randomly got cornered by a Wing Chun guy.
Like
so
a
the thing
headlock.
is, so the thing is, we don't know how that story or that narrative got implanted into Bruce's head. Was it some kind of senior who was talking to him and just maybe had heard that, or maybe made it up to make Bruce a little bit more paranoid? Was it just Bruce's idea himself, assuming defensively something like this might happen?
Could happen.
We don't know, but for whatever reason, it's clear, at least through Ted Wong, that Bruce was preparing for a potential encounter with a Wing Chun person. Now, I don't personally think, knowing from what I've heard about Yip Man's character, and of course, by the time I'm hearing it, it's second, third hand anyway, so I cannot speak for someone I never met, but it seems pretty clear that Yip Man's character, he was a very easygoing guy. He would just kind of say yes. He was like, he wasn't disagreeable at all. He was just almost agreeable to a fault, where they called him like yes man, where he would just say sure,
Yip Man,
like,
yes man.
Yeah, he didn't want to he didn't want to like, ruffle any feathers and stuff like that. So the idea that then he would actively go out of his way to train someone to go to America to beat up Bruce Lee seems a little bit far-fetched. It also implies that Yip Man must have felt threatened.
He's a sweet guy.
Because you're not going to send someone to go kick someone's ass unless you feel to a certain degree this person is threatening you or threatening your existence. Because if you don't, like if one of my students left and then created their own, revolutionized flying Wing Chun style, all right, and it was like, oh, I learned from the Kung Fu genius, but I realized I had to change the methods and make it superior and all this kind of stuff. The last idea in my mind would be like, oh, I need to go and shut that person up, because you know why? Because I got to run my own school and teach my own students.
Yeah, you got too much to worry about.
What someone else does or teaches, cannot be top of mind for me. I got to be focusing on my shit, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think Yip Man would have been that bothered. He didn't see Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's in another country. He would just hear secondhand, or Bruce was in a magazine saying this. Okay, fine, but it wasn't like the guy was next door taking. It wasn't like he was on the
Gramo.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So I have a little bit of doubts that Yip Man would have the desire to actually do this. So I think either some kind of senior planted this idea in Bruce Lee's head to mess with him, or maybe it was a half truth. Yip Man said something as a joke or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really think that he would have done it, all right? Which then leads us to, what are the results?
Mm.
Well, no one actually came to challenge Bruce Lee. And then eventually Bruce Lee moved to Hong Kong to make movies, and he's in Yip Man's backyard. And did any Wing Chun people come to challenge Bruce Lee? Because if there was a time that people would have been really salty at Bruce, it wasn't just after he created Jeet Kune Do. I mean, Wing Chun people. It would have been he created Jeet Kune Do, he became famous, and now he's in their backyard in Hong Kong. And now not only did he create his own style, now he's a famous movie star. So if there's anyone who wants to gun for Bruce Lee and then make him look bad from the Wing Chun family, it would have been during that time. As it ends up, no one from the Wing Chun family came to challenge Bruce Lee. There were maybe some other people who were trying to challenge him because of movie stuff. But they had their chance. And then Bruce met with his former teacher, Wong Sun Leung, and they had some exchanges or whatever, but it was mostly friendly. And it wasn't like he was there to represent Yip Man.
Okay.
And so the result is, while this story Bruce may have believed this, nothing actually happened. No one actually came. So I have some reservations whether the thing is actually true.
Okay.
All right. And I think that maybe Yip Man was the one that had everything to lose. He knew that Bruce was a pretty decent fighter when he was younger. And he knew that Bruce went to the States and, most likely improved himself. So if Yip Man wants to send someone to teach Bruce a lesson and Bruce ends up beating that guy, now Wing Chun really has a black eye, because it's not just Bruce criticizing Wing Chun. Now Wing Chun has legit lost to Bruce Lee. So Yip Man was the one that had everything to lose. So I think just in the calculus of the whole thing, I don't think he would have necessarily done it.
Okay.
And so I believe there may have been something there, or Bruce might have been training it, but I don't really think it was as sinister or plotted out as it's otherwise been
Could
mentioned.
have been a little penoid.
Yes. Not to mention, when we look through Bruce's medical records, the reason why he hurt his back was during intercourse with Linda. So so now we actually know, he had some back. He had some. Yeah, I was like, wow, he was really going for his A game there. But it's in the doctor's notes that's where the initial spasm that he had, that then he knew something was wrong, actually happened during intercourse, not doing good mornings. So I think the fact that he hurt his back doing good mornings, I think that's what they said, because they didn't want to say, he had it. But we now have access to medical records, and we know this was the case.
Can't put that out.
So I think that was like a little bit of narrative changing. Plus, Bruce Lee had already...
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, right?
That
was the good morning.
Yeah.
It wasn't doing good mornings. It was doing good morning.
Good morning.
Right? And perhaps earlier, he was already suffering some kind of back issues. Because if we look into, in the late 60s, as some of the stuff that came out during his autopsy inquest, that's why we have some of the medical records, because the autopsy inquest. We know that he was already being treated for some back problems even in the late 60s. So I think that Bruce may have had some lower back issues, which were exacerbated by his martial arts training and maybe from the good mornings and maybe from other activities. But I don't think it was necessarily from one thing. But yeah, whether this, Yip Man was really training someone to beat up Bruce Lee, I have my reservations.
I do know it wasn't from shoveling snow.
Not in Southern California, right? No. And that's all I got to say about that topic. And now we're going to move on to our Patreon questions. So for anyone who has been following our podcast for a while, we've changed the format a little bit because most of the people on YouTube want me to talk about stuff like what I just talked about. But most of our Patreons and YouTube supporters, they actually want me to talk about specific things regarding Wing Chun, training questions, history, all that kind of stuff. And so we decided that, for those who support us on Patreon or on our YouTube memberships, I'll answer all those questions. And we'll do that. So if you're a YouTube or Patreon member, you'll get the rest of this episode. And for the rest of you guys, I will see you next time. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. And if you want me to answer your personal questions about Wing Chun, training, Bruce Lee, whatever, join us on Patreon. Or you can also join us here for YouTube memberships. And those special questions will be answered after the regular episode. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.